We all hate to get pulled over, but you know, when this happens to me in the US and it happens to me in Mexico, I react differently. When it happens to me in the US, the first thing I think about is, you know what, I hope I don't get a ticket. And when it happens to me in Mexico, the first thing I'm thinking is, I hope these aren't corrupt cops looking to shake me down. That's just the reality of the situation. So in this video, I'm going to be sharing some tips with you if you ever find yourself in this position south of the border. Before we get started, I just want to say that there are a lot of good cops in Mexico. I know this for a fact because I've met quite a few of them over the years. Still, unfortunately, there are a significant number of bad apples out there that abuse their power to line their own pockets at the expense of citizens and tourists. Speaking of tourists, from my experience, I found that there tend to be more bad apples in the tourist areas, which makes sense because, well, tourists have money. If they're foreign tourists, they're going to be easier to intimidate. They don't know what kind of, recourse they have if they are extorted. So if you're a corrupt cop, I mean, it seems like a pretty sound business plan. People often ask me, how common is this whole police extortion thing? Am I really likely to encounter that? Well, unfortunately, it is pretty common. In fact, the last time it happened to me was only a month ago in Tulum, Mexico. And yes, Tulum is a tourist area. That particular encounter with the police followed the common pattern on how these kind of extortions go. So while I tell you about it, I'm going to go through the stages of the traffic stop extortion scheme. Yes, I air quoted that. So what happened a month ago is Linda and I were staying at a hotel in Akumal, Mexico. It's where we used to live, but we sold our condo, so now we stay with friends or at a hotel. And I don't have a car there anymore, so I borrowed a friend's car to run down to Tulum to run some errands. While I was driving, my wife ended up calling me, and it's not my car, so I don't have it Bluetooth, so I'm talking on the phone, which is a no-no. And my timing sucked because while I'm going over a speed bump slowly, I look and there's a motorcycle cop standing there and he points at me and points to the side of the road. So the officer walked up and he asked me, do you know why I stopped you? And I said, yes, it's my fault. I was on my cell phone. I told him, you know what, my wife's not feeling great. She ended up calling me. I know it's wrong, but hey, it's not my car, it's not Bluetooth. I gave him the whole background just so he knew what he was dealing with. He was not impressed by that, so he asked for my license and registration. I gave him my license and my buddy's registration out of the glove box. That's when he told me I'd be getting a citation for using my cell phone, and he would have to seize my documents as a guarantee of payment. And of course, I couldn't pay that day, so I'd have to return the next day to pay and get my documents back. To that, I responded, look, is there any way you can just keep my license and give me back the registration? Because it's not my car, and that wouldn't be really fair, would it? And he goes, okay, I'll just keep the license. About that time, a second police officer pulled up on a motorcycle, and he walked up and looks at the first guy and he's like, so what do we got here? First cop goes, he was talking on his cell phone. New cop's like, talking on his cell phone? Can't talk on your cell phone, it's got to be hands-free. I'm like, yep, I know, my fault, not my car, no Bluetooth, wife called. That's it. So this is when the second cop is really careful to look inside my car and see where my cell phone is to make sure he is not being recorded. And that's when we entered stage 3. So the new arrival says, you're gonna have to come down tomorrow and it gets expensive down there, but there is a way we can take care of this right here on the side of the road. Isn't he nice? There's a guy that goes above and beyond to deliver exceptional police service. So in stage 3, they throw a little hook out there to see if you bite. And this is typically where the driver would show some interest in clearing up the matter on the side of the road and not having their documents seized. So then you enter the negotiation phase, which is still part of stage 3 in what is it worth to you to get out of this? Now the negotiation aspect of phase 3 can take a while. I've known people that have had to sit there even 30 to 45 minutes and the officer's just kind of wearing them down. And during this phase, it's not unusual for the officers to actually increase the threats to include taking your vehicle or even taking you to jail if we can't somehow resolve this on the side of the road. If this happens to you, it is super important to keep in mind at all times that although this sort of behavior is unfortunately not uncommon in Mexico, it is still illegal. The police officers involved are not only risking their jobs, but their freedom. They can be arrested for this. That means that they need to close the deal right there and they don't want other people to know about it. Having spent years in Mexico, I am very familiar with the stages of the traffic stop extortion scam. In this case, I didn't really have a lot of time, so I just decided to call an end to it right as stage 3 was beginning. When the officer said there is a way we can handle it on the side of the road, I told him in Spanish, you know what? I'll just take the ticket. I did it. I don't care. He had been smiling when he offered that exceptional police service, but when I said I'll just take the ticket, he goes like this. And just walks back to his motorcycle and leaves and doesn't say goodbye to me or even the other officer. Now the remaining officer, the first guy, he's not smiling anymore either. He knows they're not going to get any money. He opens his ticket book, and frankly I was surprised they had a ticket book. A lot of times it's just a whole big bluff. And he just starts tapping it with his pen, but he's not writing, and he's looking at it, kind of looking around. And he says, so, said wife's not feeling great, huh? No, not feeling great today. That's why she called, so I picked it up. My fault. I deserve the ticket, whatever. Yeah. Here's all your stuff back. Just don't do that again. The end. No ticket, no bribe paid. So that's normally how these things play out. Stage 1 is your violation or alleged violation. I've been stopped for things I didn't do. 2, they're going to threaten to take your documents, your vehicle, or you. And then we enter 3, where they're going to give you an out because they're just super nice folks and you can take care of it on the side of the road. When you enter stage 3, you have 2 choices, and that is to pay or stand your ground like I did and say politely, you know what, go ahead and do whatever you need to do. Many times they don't even have the authority to do what they're threatening to do, so it's all a big bluff. So once you call them on it, most folks just give up and the traffic stop ends. In the incident that I just told you about, I have no doubt that the officer could have seized my license as a guarantee of payment and given me a ticket. He just elected not to. But let's say my strategy to just kind of stand my ground hadn't worked. What's the worst thing that really would have happened? He would have kept my license until I paid the ticket the next day, so who cares? Some people are gonna be like, well, what if you're in a hurry and you're on the way to the airport and you can't come back the next day? You know, should you pay then? No. Again, what's the worst thing that's gonna happen? He's gonna keep the driver's license. Okay, I'm good with that. I'm not paying the bribe. I can get a duplicate license later. As a tourist driving a rental car, that is one of the most likely places that you're going to be stopped, is on your way back to the airport to leave. Which again is a sound business strategy for a crooked cop because, well, there's a sense of urgency added. I've heard from dozens of people who have told me that they were stopped on the way back to the airport, and all of them ended up paying a lot of money, sometimes hundreds of dollars, just to get out of it. Just ask for the ticket, let them take your license, get a duplicate license when you get home. The cop you're talking to may not have the authority to even enforce traffic laws. Did you know that not every police officer even has the authority to stop people for traffic violations or issue citations? That's true. Now we're talking about officers at the state and municipal levels. Certain police officers in those organizations will be designated as transit officers. You can often identify them, but not always, because they'll have the word tránsito on their uniform or on their vehicle, or sometimes in some jurisdictions, vial. These are the only folks authorized to stop you strictly for traffic violations and issue citations. The other officers can stop you if they suspect you're involved with some type of criminal offense. Still, that doesn't stop the other officers from stopping tourists, pretending that they have that authority in order to get a bribe. If you're dealing with one of the other officers, everything they're telling you is a bluff. It's not just tourists that fall for these things, it's also locals. So in some jurisdictions, to help combat police corruption, the government will actually mark the police vehicles with some type of signage indicating if that particular unit has the authority to issue citations. That just shows you how common this type of thing really is. In Mexico City, they took protecting the public from this type of corruption a step further, and they actually created an app that you can use when you're stopped to see if that particular officer has the authority to enforce traffic laws. It's called Mi Policía, and I actually have another video about it. I'll post a link to it in the description portion of this one so you can check it out. If you're going through Mexico City, I suggest you download it. Now, when I'm talking about certain officers not having the authority to enforce traffic laws, I'm talking about officers at the municipal and state levels, not federal. Now, just so you know, there are no longer any federal police like the federales, like people used to say, driving those really cool blue Chargers. Not anymore. They were replaced with the National Guard a few years back, and now you might find yourself getting stopped by a pretty cool white Charger with black lettering on it. Those National Guard officers stopping you do have the authority to enforce traffic laws. In this video, I've mentioned several times about the police threatening to take your documents, and that topic comes up a lot in expat Facebook groups, and a lot of people be like, they can't do that, it's a bluff to begin with, don't even hand them your documents because all of that's illegal. Let me address that now. So the question being, if you do commit a traffic violation, does an officer who is authorized to give you a traffic citation have the authority to take, say, your driver's license as a guarantee of payment? The answer is, it depends on the laws in the jurisdiction where you are stopped in Mexico. I will tell you that in the majority of Mexican jurisdictions, the traffic laws are written to permit the seizure of a license, registration, plates, or even the vehicle in limited circumstances as a guarantee of payment. This is normal in Mexico, so don't jump to conclusions just because they said they're going to take a document or the tag from you and then start, showing your butt and end up in jail. So I'm going to sum up my advice here. If you're ever stopped by the police for an alleged traffic infraction and they threaten to take any enforcement action if they do not receive some type of monetary gain on the side of the road, my advice is don't pay, stand your ground. I would remain polite and tell them, go ahead and do whatever you need to do. This is just my advice. At the end of the day, you have to do what you feel most comfortable with and what's in your best interest. In other words, you be you. Well, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, just do me a favor and give it a thumbs up. And if you like videos about Mexico like this one, you might want to subscribe and hit the little bell so you'll always be notified anytime I come out with something new. Until next time, stay informed and stay safe.